It's now 18 minutes before 4 o'clock, and you are listening to On the Coast from CBC Vancouver. Nice to have Radio West listeners along with us as well today. Well, so-called conversion therapy has long been recognized as a harmful practice to those who have been through it. It involves trying to change the sexuality or gender identity of the patient, who is often young, sometimes a child. The practice has been known to lead to mental health issues, drug use, suicide. And now a bill from the federal Liberal government would criminalize conversion therapy in this country. But despite multi-party support for the bill, a local MP is pushing back against it. Tamara Jansen, the Conservative MP for Cloverdale-Langley City, has created an e-petition pushing back on the bill, claiming it would criminalize, quote, therapies offered by medical professionals and normal conversations between children and parents, end quote. Jansen is an evangelical Christian and an anti-abortion activist. And while Jansen declined to comment on the story today, 3 MPs have been good enough to join us for this conversation. Hetty Fry is the Liberal MP for Vancouver Centre. Dan Albus is the Conservative MP for Central Okanagan-Similkameen-Nicola. And Randall Garrison is the NDP MP for Esquimalt-Saanich-Sooke. He is the NDP critic on LGBTQ issues. Thanks to all of you for joining us today.
Hi, Gloria.
Now, Dan Albus, just to be clear off the top, we are not here today to debate the pros and cons of conversion therapy, okay? There is ample evidence that it is without merit and it can be harmful. So, Dan, what does it say to people in the LGBTQ plus community to have a member of your party pushing back on a bill that would criminalize conversion therapy?
Well, I think it's important to start first by saying that the MP in question, every MP gets to decide which petitions they sponsor, but they actually don't write them. You have to have 5 people in your constituency or somewhere else in Canada sponsor it, and then you as an MP can put it forward. I wouldn't have done this. That being said, every MP has their own thought pattern on how to deal with those kinds of issues.
But she did have the option of saying, no, I won't put it forward, did she not?
And that's a great question for the individual MP. Ron McKinnon, a local MP, did one on 5G and wireless. And so people were asking questions about that. Ultimately, I think it's important that people are able to petition their government and to find out what the government knows and to share why it believes this is an important issue. I personally oppose any so-called conversion therapy, particularly those that degrade and dehumanize children by trying to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. Full stop. But again, there are different views. This is a democracy. And if some people have concerns, the government, by putting forward the legislation and by responding to this petition, can respond to those concerns and share factual information. That's how we get better as a democracy, is by sharing information. But let me be absolutely clear. Conservatives, we do not support these kinds of so-called conversion therapy that especially that demeans and dehumanizes people. Everyone has rights. Our children are our biggest assets, and we must protect the vulnerable.
So when you have one of your own MPs, Tamara Jansen, Conservative MP for Cloverdale-Langley City, pushing back in a public way with this, presenting this e-petition, what are your concerns about how this reflects on the Conservative Party as a whole?
Well, again, in democracies are never, clean and orderly. People every day come to me with different concerns. I'm sure Randall and Hetty will say that many people come to them with different petitions, and they do have a right to petition their government and to say we don't believe in this. But the government should also respond back by giving factual information. That's how we as a society can move forward, and that's something that I'm supportive of. What I'm not supportive of is this practice. That's why I'm going to be supporting it at first reading. And if there are concerns, that's why we have a committee process. Randall and Hetty know them very, very well, for us to bring in experts so that we can address those concerns and to make sure the legislation does what it says it will do. That's an important thing. Parliament is a deliberative body, and ultimately in a democracy, people should be heard, and a government should be able to answer those basic questions about its legislation. And that's a very good process overall. Am I necessarily happy that this particular petition is there? No. But again, it's a democracy, and that's something I think is important to recognize.
I do want to move on to our other MPs, but before I leave this, you're not happy about it, but were you unhappy enough about it to contact Tamara Jansen personally at any point?
Well, I just found it about late last night, so I had a full slate of meetings today. But, again, I will express that. But at the same token, every member of Parliament receives these requests. This is something that Randall Garrison, one of his own colleagues, who's now the mayor of Vancouver, had put forward, knowing that, again, from time to time there may be issues that people feel very hotly about, that people contest. But in a democracy, it's, those concerns can be heard and then addressed. I think we're better off with an e-petition process that's open, and Tamara and every MP should be accountable to their citizens and explain their own thought process.
Hedy Fry, I'd like to bring you in on this. From the Liberal perspective, then, why is it important to enshrine this protection against conversion therapy into law?
Well, I think it's very important to enshrine this into law because it's a harmful practice. We know, and you mentioned earlier on, that in fact we have an increased suicide rate for transgender persons. And we know that 20% of gay men have been subjected at some point in their lives to this kind of therapy, and this really does affect their mental health and their sense of well-being and increase suicide rates. It's harmful. And especially when you're a minor and you don't have that ability to speak out and a parent forces you into this. And that's when a lot of 20% of gay men who have been forced into this therapy, most of it happened because they were unable to speak up because they were minors. So we are saying that we want to create a country where all Canadians have the right to be themselves. Now, I think I just wanted to hone in on the argument that this particular member of Parliament, Tamara, is making on behalf of her constituents. And I think she's basically saying that the bill is not explicit, that it isn't clear about what conversion therapy is. And the bill said very clearly, if you read it, and I don't know if she has read it, it says conversion therapy is defined as a practice, treatment, or service that relates to having a person change their identity, transgender or back to cisgender, or to have people who are gay converted into being heterosexual. Those are the things that were specific in saying. But what it did do, and she said, that means parents can't speak to their children if their child is exploring. The bill has two specific clauses that allows for a person who is thinking about what their identity is to discuss it with anyone, to discuss it with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, their mother, a friend, so that those people are not penalized or criminalized. It also allows for physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists to work with a patient who is in fact experiencing those things and helping them to transition if they choose to do so as a trans person, or to assure them and support them that they don't have to go through this therapy. So it tries to allow for medical, psychological, and just simple chatting with a friend if you are not sure what you're doing. It doesn't criminalize any of that. It actually criminalizes the therapy and the practice and of actually and service of trying to change somebody from trans to cisgender and somebody from being gay to being heterosexual. That's what the bill is specific in stating. So the argument that Tamara makes that it's not clear in the bill meant that she really didn't read the bill.
Okay, well, I'm looking at an article about her pushback here, and she's quoted as saying, "My issue with Bill C-8 is that a poorly written definition of conversion therapy could end up criminalizing activities and even private conversations, which have nothing to do with conversion therapy." And that hits at what you just said, Hedy.
Yes, and that's exactly what, it's very clear in our bill that we are not doing that. We are even allowing for somebody to go talk to their friend or their doctor or their parents and say, "I'm not sure who I am, I'm not sure what I am," and do that as long as this person doesn't try to convert them.
Okay, Randall Garrison, we'd love to hear from you and the view of the NDP. I mean, how do you feel about the Conservative Party having one of its members questioning a bill that would ban a practice that has been, it's harmed thousands of LGBTQ people?
Well, this is is something you Democrats have been working on for a long time, is to get this ban in place. And I guess my problem with the petition is that it largely consists of disinformation. And members of Parliament have a choice when positions are presented to them, and I have declined when I believe the petition misrepresents the facts, and I'm disappointed that Tamara Jansen did not decline. It says in its whereases, first of all, it says that people might need treatment for sexual orientation or gender identity. I just find that offensive, and I think most people would. It does this thing about criminalizing therapies offered by medical professionals. There is no such thing. No medical professional organization in Canada, no counseling organization allows conversion therapy. So it's misinformation once again. And then it goes into this idea that somehow it affects how parents relate to their children. And I think Hetty Fry's been very clear. The bill specifically has an exemption for people exploring their identity or their sexual orientation. So the petition is complete misinformation and is not helpful to debate. So when Mr. Albus presents it as, democracy is about debating ideas, this petition doesn't really do that.
All right. Dan Albus, back to you now. You have already stated off the top that you and your party oppose conversion therapy. Is that right?
Yes, so that's the case.
Okay. Now,
but I would just simply say to Mr. Garrison's comments there is that, first of all, the whole premise of an e-petition is so that citizens can make representation to government and be heard and then be responded to. Getting good information through the House of Commons system means that they will get an email from the government if there's enough people that support the petition, and the government can then get its information out. Many of the things that Dr. Fry had mentioned, many of the things that Randall has mentioned. So, if we want to have a citizenry that feels that it is part of society where it can get good information to deal with bad ideas or misinformation, as Mr. Garrison had mentioned, that's one way to deal with it. Again, Canada's a democracy. Not everyone gets it right. Not everyone gets a chance to read a bill or know as much as Mr. Garrison or as much as Dr. Fry. This is a process that, we should be supporting in terms of getting good information out. And again, today I'm very happy to be talking about my party, talking about how we support children, talking about how we want to make sure that Parliament as a deliberative body gets this right.
Well, and how much support, Dan Albus, is there within your Conservative Party to take steps to legislate protections for LGBTQ plus people in this country?
We haven't talked about it as a group, but many of the Conservative MPs I've spoken to right across the country we generally want to see this go forward so that we can get experts there so that they can talk, as Mr. Garrison has said, hear from professionals about what some of these so-called conversion therapy. I even have a problem with the actual name conversion therapy as it somehow is beneficial to someone. Therapy is something to engage with someone that takes you through a process that ends up where you're in a better space, physically, mental health-wise, etc. And obviously, anytime you cajole or push people, that's not a good space. So, this is something that lots of people may have heard of. Do not have the full picture. That's where we can talk about these things. And really, Parliament is meant to talk about ideas. It's meant to talk about our values. It's meant to talk about how we deal with these situations, how we as a society work with one another to get the right information out and to make the legislation, if it's not right, to make it even better. I hope that Dr. Fry would admit not every government gets it right, even on the first draft. That's why parliamentarians do the work we do.
Well, it's important, Dan Albus, that we're having this conversation this week. This is Pride Week here in Vancouver. We'd usually be getting ready for the big celebration on the streets of Vancouver where, 500,000 people show up for the Pride Parade. Why don't Conservative Party leaders march in Pride parades?
Well, we already have two of the reported front-runners, Mr. O'Toole as well as Mr. Peter MacKay, have both said that they will gladly participate in those. Look, every individual member of Parliament has to decide how they conduct themselves. For myself, I walk in Kelowna Pride, I've walked in the Ottawa Pride event, and Vancouver Pride event, because I see that there is a growing need for people to see that their leaders, identify that there are vulnerabilities and there are issues, something that Mr. Garrison has worked on very hard. He's come to Kelowna, I don't know how many times, to show his support for that community, and I'm grateful for that. Why? Is because there's a growing awareness of these issues, and if you don't have parliamentarians like us discussing them in a rational, reasonable way, and making sure that people get the best information and feel that they can be heard, that's how we as a society evolve together. That's an important part, and we shouldn't rule discussions out unless they're absolutely off the wall. And while I agree that there may be some issues with the petition itself, members of Parliament are there to make it straight, to be able to talk about these issues in a straightforward way that people can understand.
Randall Garrison, ample evidence, as we say, that conversion therapy can be very, very harmful. Why do you think this kind of thing is still controversial to some people and to this one MP?
Well, that's a little hard for me as a gay man to figure out. But I think, more importantly, we're talking about here a process where the petition goes forward and it presents false and misleading information. And that's my problem with this petition. As you say, Gloria, the science is very clear. You can't change someone's sexual orientation or their gender identity, and that attempts to do so are very harmful to those who are subjected to it. And so this petition really undermines all those efforts to make progress and for people to become comfortable with who they are, with their orientation or their gender identity. So it has a very negative impact. I don't agree with Dan Elvis that just any petition saying anything should be debated. This actually it's a form of promotion of hatred.
Hetty Fry, the e-petition at last glance has 450 signatures. How likely is this petition, to have any kind of an impact on the bill as it's currently written, do you think?
I don't know. I think that a lot of people are going to vote on this bill. I know the Liberals are going to vote solidly for it because we believe in it, and I think that there have been many other parties. Randall talks about his party and others who would support it. I think the bill will pass. My concern is that it's duplicitous for Tamara to say that she's putting this out because of what the bill does not say and how the bill could be misconstrued. All she had to do was to read the bill and see how clear the bill is on all of the issues that she is bringing up as reasons for reviewing the bill.
Okay, I'm going to have to jump in right there. I'm watching the clock. I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. It's an important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Hetty and Dan for their support.
Okay, Hetty Fry, Liberal MP for Vancouver Centre, Dan Albus, the Conservative MP for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola, and Randall Garrison, the NDP MP for Esquimalt Saanich, Suk, the NDP critic on LGBTQ issues. Lisa, you've got about 20 seconds to take us through the traffic.